Okay, welcome to the next R Club safety training in our series. This time we're going to talk about safety data sheets or SDSs. Again, I'm John Kenny. I'm happy to be here from Cottney Consulting Group to continue in the education of safety for you and your company. So what are we going to cover today? We're going to talk about what is an SDS, the identification area, the hazards, the composition, first aid, fire safety, storage and handling, reactivity, toxicology, and more. So what is a safety data sheet or SDS? The information contained in a safety data sheet is very similar to the material safety data sheets, MSDS, except now the safety data sheets are required to be presented in a consistent, user-friendly 16-section format. So a lot of you are familiar with MSDS sheets. Make sure you do not use any of the old MSDS sheets that you may have lying around. They're no longer in compliance. You must use the current safety data sheet that are supplied with all your from all your suppliers that supply your membrane, your stuff on your projects, materials, and so forth. We're going to review what to look at to help workers who handle hazardous chemicals become familiar with the format and understand the contents of the sheet. This information contained in the sheet must be in English, although it may be in other languages as well. So it is required to be in English, and you can have it in other languages, but you have to have both. So why we're going to review this? Because you must train your workers on this. This should be done on a yearly basis, just like the other topics that we've been covering. That's why we're breaking them down into monthly segments. Understand what an SDS is, the information it should include, and how it relates to your health and safety, and make sure your employees understand these things as well. Know how to access the SDSs for your particular work area. Be sure that all SDSs are readily accessible to employees. Retain all SDSs that come in with chemical shipments. Identification. Product identifier used on the label or any other common names or symbols. Names, addresses, phone numbers, the manufacturer, and emergency phone number. The recommended use of the chemical or product. So again, here's section 1. This is an older one. It's now Elevate, but this was Firestone, typical building products example. So again, look what's underneath section 1.1. That is your product identifier. It's going to tell you everything that this sheet covers. Relevant uses, again, construction roofing material. Details of supplier and safety data sheet manufacturer. It's going to tell you the information on the company that manufactured or produced this information. It'll give you an emergency phone number for the manufacturer. Hazards, hazard classifications of the chemical, signal word, hazard segments, pictograms, precautionary statements, description of the hazards that have been classified. If it contains an ingredient or ingredients with unknown toxicity, a statement describing how much percentage of the mixture consists of those ingredient or ingredients with an unknown acute toxicity. So sometimes you'll see that where they don't have exact, but they'll tell you what that is. So here's a sample of section 2. So again, you're going to have classification of the substance or mixture. CLP is not classified, DSP is not classified, label elements, hazard statements, no label elements required, risk phase, no label elements required. So this particular area, this is not a hazardous, that's why you see all the not classified. This is not a hazardous chemical. Composition, substances, chemical name and common names and synonyms, chemical abstracts, impurities and stabilizing additives, which are themselves classified and which contribute to the classification of the chemical, mixtures, same information required for substances, chemical name and concentration with the exact percentage, and all ingredients which are classified as health hazards are present above their cutoff concentration limits. So again, they're going to give you the limits that you can handle without being over the risk factor. Present a health risk below the cutoff concentration limits. And if there is a trade secret claim is made, there is a batch-to-batch variation, or the SDS is used for a group of substantially similar mixtures. A statement that specific chemical identity and or exact percentage concentration of the composition has been withheld as a trade secret is required. So here's a sample section of what all that means. Substances. Material does not meet the criteria of substance in accordance with regulations. Mixtures, non-hazardous components, not NDA 100%. So again, this happens to be a non-hazardous area, so that's why you're not seeing any specific areas in here. So this is how it's broken down in each section. So one advantage to the SDSs over the other MSDS system is every one of them is going to have specific information in each section that pertains, so it's a lot easier for review. First aid. Provide first aid instructions compliant with the type of exposure, inhalation, skin and eye contact, and ingestion. Description of the most important symptoms and effects of any symptoms that could occur. Recommendations for immediate medical care and specialty treatment needed when necessary. So this is a sample section of 4. Inhalation. First aid is not expected to be necessary if the material is used under ordinary conditions and is recommended. If signs, symptoms develop, move person to fresh air, administer oxygen if breathing is difficult, give artificial respiration if victim is not breathing. If signs, symptoms continue, get medical attention. So again, it's telling you what to look for, what to do, and how to do it underneath first aid measures. Skin. First aid is not expected to be necessary if materials are used under ordinary conditions as recommended. Wash skin with soap and water. If signs, symptoms develop, get medical attention. So basically all that means is you're not going to have a problem using this as recommended and cleaning your hands with your skin with simple soap and water so that any residue that may be there would come off. Your eyes. First aid is not expected to be necessary if materials used under ordinary conditions and as recommended. If contact with material occurs, flush eye with water. If signs, symptoms develop, get medical attention. Ingestion. First aid is not expected to be necessary if materials used under ordinary condition. If signs develop, get medical attention. So if these were a toxic area, they would tell you what respirator to use for inhalation, skin, what protection to use, eye, what protection to use, and ingestion, what would happen and what you would need to do immediately. Like it could say you might have to drink milk or whatever the recommendations may be for that toxic chemical, or what not to do. Most important symptoms and effects, both acute and delayed. Refer to section 11, toxicology information. So it's telling you there to go to another section. Indication of any immediate medical attention or special treatment needed. Notes to physician. All treatment should be based and observe signs of symptoms that distress patient. Consideration should be given the possibility of overexposure materials other than this product may have occurred. So again, it's a notation. Fire safety. Again, they have to list the recommendations of extinguishing equipment and information about extinguishing equipment that is not appropriate for each situation. List recommendations on specific hazards that develop from the chemical during the fire, such as any hazard composition products created when the chemical burns. Recommendations on special protective equipment or precautions for firefighters. Section 5, example. Extinguishing material. Suitable extinguishing material, water, foam, dry chemical, CO2. Unsuitable extinguishing material, none known. Special hazards arising from substance or mixture, does not present any special fire or explosive hazards. Upon reaching temperatures of combustion, produces a corrosive or toxic fumes. Advice for firefighters. Firefighters should wear appropriate protective equipment and self-contained breathing apparatus with a full face shield operated with positive pressure mode. Structural firefighters, protective clothing will only provide limited protection. So this is in here. So a lot of times before a firefighter will fight certain fires, they're going to want access into SDSs. Now, you may not be on the job anymore, but they will look up through records what that may be and have the different SDSs. I've actually done training at fire for firefighters on these areas we use in roofing. So again, all the information on how you fight a fire, whether it's you locally trying to put it out when something happens as you're calling 911 or when the firefighter arrives. Release measures for how to respond to an incident. Use of personal precautions such as removal of ignition sources or providing sufficient ventilation. and protective equipment to prevent contamination of skin, eyes, and clothing. Emergency procedures, which include instructions for evacuations, consulting experts when needed, or appropriate protective clothing. Methods and materials used for containment, covering the drains and capping procedures, cleanup procedures. So again, on this one, personal protective equipment, no special precautions expected, no emergency procedures are expected, and no special precautions necessary. So again, this was a TPO membrane material. Methods for material: pick up pieces and place in container or bag for disposal, because it's a TPO. Reference other section, refer to section 8, exposure controls, PPE, section 13, disposal considerations. So again, if this was a chemical, like a splice cleaner or other chemicals that we use, there would be different requirements in here. Handling and storage. Under this section, you're going to get precautions for safe handling, including recommendations for handling incompatible chemicals, minimizing the release of chemical into the environment, and providing advice in general hygiene practices. Recommendation on conditions for safe storage, including any incompatibilities. Provide advice on specific storage requirements. So again, manufacturers all, regardless who it is, all of these will be done in the same manner. So sample section 7. This one, use good safety and industrial hygiene practices for storage. Store in a cool, dry, well-ventilated place. And specific use. Refer to section 1.2, relevant identified uses. Again, now that's taking you back to 1.2 section of what it's used for. Exposure. OSHA permissible exposure limits, American Conference of Governmental Hygiene threshold limits, and other limits as a manufacturer or employee preparing safety data sheets were available. Appropriate engineering controls, like example, use of local exhaust ventilations or use of any closed systems. Recommendations for personal protective measures to prevent illness or injury from the exposure of chemicals such as PPE. Any special requirements for PPE, such as gloves, materials, such as PVC or nitrile rubber gloves, breakthrough time of the gloves material, etc. So again, on this section example, control parameters, no exposure limit guidelines available for the material or the components. Exposure controls, under normal condition of use, special ventilation is not required. So what would that mean? Possibly if you were in an enclosed area, that would then require some sort of special ventilation because it's not normal. So again, if you get into a situation that is outside of what the recommendations are, you want to check with that manufacturer of what your upcoming condition is going to be and what recommendations may be. PPE, no respiratory protection is required under normal conditions. Under normal conditions of use, eye protection is not required. No skin protection is ordinarily required under normal use. Follow best practices for site management and disposal of waste. So again, you notice everything is normal use, normal conditions. So if you're using any of these products or chemicals or whatever they may be that are outside the norm, then this would not pertain and you're going to have to take special precautions. Physical properties, appearance, physical state, color, etc. Odor threshold, pH, melting point, freezing points, upper, lower, inflammatory, explosive limits, solubilities. The SDS may contain every item on the above list because information may not be relevant or not available. When this occurs, a notation to that effect must be made for that chemical property. Manufacturers may also add other relevant properties such as dust index and combustible dust and such other exposure elements. So in this example, 9.1, information on physical and chemical properties. It's telling you its physical form, it's a solid. It's giving you the appearance and description, black and white sheet, white and gray sheet, tan and gray sheet, gray and gray. So it's giving you all combinations that you can come across. It's giving you general properties, boiling point, not relevant, melting point, data lacking, volatility, flammability, environmental. Again, it's telling you on these particular examples, not relevant. Other information will be listed as necessary. Reactivity, description of specific test data and chemicals, chemical stability, and other information will be available. Section 10 sample, reactivity, no dangerous reaction known under conditions of normal use. Chemical stability, stable under normal temperatures and pressures. So if it was an unstable, it was a chemical or product that was only stable up to certain temperature or pressure, it would be noted here. Possibilities of hazard reaction. Hazarded polymerization will not occur. Conditions to avoid. No data available. No data available for incombustible materials, incompatible materials, and hazardous composition products. Thermal decomposition could produce CO2 oxides, or nitrogen. So it's telling you if this product decomposes, these are the possible chemical effects that will come out of it. So again, everything's going to be listed and will be different for each product. Toxicology, information on the likely routes of exposure for inhalation, ingestion, skin, and eye contacts. Description of delayed, immediate, or chronic defects. Numerical measures of toxicity. Description of the symptoms, an indication whether the chemical is listed or it is a potential carcinogen or other areas of interest that are required by OSHA. So here's an example, information of toxicology effects. This material is an article that does not release or otherwise result in exposure to hazardous chemical under normal use. So again, it's giving you that. We talked about the acute. It says not relevant. Aspiration hazard, right on down the line, carcinogen and germ cell, all that, not relevant, not relevant, not relevant. If any of this was relevant, they would be listed in there and what you would need to do. Non-mandatory considerations. Here are some items that should be considered when providing safety data sheets, but are not mandatory. So again, these are information that are not mandatory, but are recommended. So this is what you're going to find. Section 12 is ecological information. Section 13 is disposal considerations. And Section 14 is transport information. So again, we saw where we did reference in this one to go to Section 13. So there would be one. So again, these are what you would find in these areas. Example in transport hazardous classes, packing group, environmental hazards, guidance on transport of bulk. So again, on certain chemicals, there are going to be requirements in here. So key takeaways. I know this has not been the most exciting, and you look at it and it's like, gosh, this is hard to digest, but it is so important because we're going to review these key takeaways. But if OSHA comes to your job site, they are going to ask your employees what they're going to point to something. And most likely, I've seen this all the time. They may go to multiple things. It's first of all, where are your SDSs? Secondly, what is this product here and how is the safe use of it? Now, memorization is impossible, but the point is, can you identify it? What do you do if this happens? Where does this product fall? These questions, if they cannot be answered and they cannot be referenced, you are in violation of OSHA and you will be receiving a fine. Now, also, or a violation. Also, they may ask if they've been trained on, and what does your training program consist of? Then they can come back to you and ask for what your documentation is, etc. So this may seem like a minor instance, but all these add up in the big world. So again, we want to keep everybody safe, and that's why it's important. So the takeaways. There's comprehensive information. SDSs provide crucial details on chemicals, including hazards and handling instructions and emergency measures. They're the blueprint to how to use these products that we're using every day. Legal requirements. Ensuring SDSs are readily accessible in the workplace is not just a best practice, it's a regulatory obligation, as I just stated. Safety first. Understanding and applying the information SDSs is vital for preventing accidents, ensuring safe handling, and protecting health. Emergency preparedness. SDSs are go-to resource for emergency responders, offering immediate access to chemical properties, protective measures, and first aid procedures. So again, somebody say ingest something and they do have to go to the hospital. You want to make sure that the hospital knows what's in that chemical, that they digest it by having these readily available. Continuous training. Regularly educating employees on how to interpret and use these SDSs is key to maintaining a safe working environment. So keep in mind, always remember, SDS sheets are more than just documents. They are a critical tool in our commitment to workplace safety, health, and environmental protection. So I look forward to seeing everybody next month. And if you have any questions, please always reach out. Roofers Coffee Shop and Cotney Consulting Group are there to help.